This is East Asia Tonight.
Good Monday evening. I'm Oteli Edwards. Tonight's top stories from East Asia. The Philippines confronts China with a diplomatic protest over a South China Sea air incident that Manila describes as dangerous. Will it spark a wider showdown? Well, Hong Kong's Jimmy Lai and his pro-democracy allies have lost their appeal. A court has upheld their convictions for unauthorized assembly during the 2019 protests. And a tropical storm makes a rare landfall in northern Japan, unleashing record rainfall and prompting the evacuation of thousands of people. Also, a plunge in foreign investment into China with a record $15 billion being pulled by investors in the June quarter. Ahead on East Asia Tonight, we delve into China's answer to SpaceX's Starlink, the Qianfan Constellation. Where does this effort stand in the nation's space ambitions? Plus, we turn to Japan, home to thousands of museums. See how it's adopting new concepts to draw in the crowds and seek out ways to make operations sustainable. The Philippines is set to file a diplomatic protest with China over an air incident over the contested South China Sea. And here's what happened. Well, Manila complained that two Chinese aircraft dropped flares in the path of a Philippine Air Force jet, which was conducting a routine patrol over Scarborough Shoal last week. Well, the military chief described China's move as dangerous and provocative and says the country will continue maritime patrols in the South China Sea. Well, over the weekend, President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. called China's actions unjustified and reckless and urged China to act responsibly both in the seas and in the skies. Well, Manila is hoping China would comply with international law and de-escalate tensions. Well, meantime, the Chinese military defended its actions, saying that the Philippines disrupted its training and accused Manila of illegally intruding into its airspace. Now, this is the latest in an increasingly tense confrontation between Manila and Beijing. The Scarborough Shoal is one of Asia's most contested maritime features and a flashpoint for flare-ups over sovereignty and fishing rights. Now, you might remember a previous incident where a Chinese fighter jet dropped flares in the flight path of an Australian helicopter over the Yellow Sea, while the chopper was on a UN sanctions enforcement mission for North Korea. Canberra called it a serious safety risk for both aircraft and personnel. And for more insights, we are joined now by Chong Jia-in, Associate Professor from the Department of Political Science at the National University of Singapore. Good to have you join us again, Dr. Chong. So first up, perhaps you can just help us understand, from Philippines' point of view, what exactly are they hoping to achieve from filing this diplomatic protest? I mean, I guess the question is it going to lead to any tangible changes in China's behavior, or is it more of just another symbolic gesture?
I think it's a little bit beyond symbolic. The Philippines, I don't think they expect any changes to PRC behavior, but they're calling attention to the fact that PLA, this is the People's Liberation Army, Air Force, Navy, their aircraft behave in ways that are dangerous and might endanger other aircraft, right? So that helps the Philippines establish a pattern of behavior by the PLA that may be what they call unsafe and unprofessional. And the hope is that this would create more international pressure to encourage the PRC and to rein in some of its perhaps more provocative kinds of behavior by its military.
Yeah, and Dr. Chong, it does seem like, both sides are sort of look like they're trying to outdo each other in showing who's being unreasonable and who's not. How do you see this ending? And I guess more importantly, will it spark a wider showdown?
So I think the incentive on all the sides involved is that they don't want a uncontrolled escalation. But short of that, they are trying to wear the other side down. They're trying to show the other side that they each mean business. And so they are going to try to come as close to the line as possible, but not cross it, in order to try to demonstrate that, hey, if you are going to push the line, there will be tangible risks for you. So both the Philippines and the PRC are trying to do this. I would note that it's not isolated to the Philippines and the PRC. The PRC is engaged in similar kinds of behavior in relation to Taiwan, in relation to Japan, as well as other navies that are and militaries that are operating in the region, as you pointed out earlier.
But like Dr. Chong, you would perhaps see that Vietnam's approach, for instance, is sort of more low-key with regards to the South China Sea, as opposed to the Philippine strategy, which is about being assertive, putting out there in the news. Can you say one is more effective than the other?
So I think the Vietnamese approach is somewhat dependent on the Philippines. So in the sense that the PRC is probably careful not to create too many conflagrations at the same time. So the fact that the Philippines is pursuing this assertive transparency approach means to say that the PRC might be a little bit more careful with Vietnam at this point in time. I say at this point in time is because at other moments when you see the Vietnamese try to have their own patrols, when they try to do oil exploration, or even fishing, they do sometimes elicit a very robust and tough PRC response. So in some respects, the Vietnamese, I think, have found a opportunity right now to push ahead. They've been trying to fortify the features that they occupy in the South China Sea. And I guess the PRC hasn't gotten around to reacting yet, or perhaps they don't want to confront too many actors at the same time.
Also, we are kind of seeing more countries, they're signing sort of military agreements supporting the Philippines. Do you think that China, at this point, they are perhaps rethinking its approach? Is there room for a diplomatic approach, a solution rather?
So I think a diplomatic solution, which means some resolution to the disputes, that is probably not going to be coming anytime soon. What we probably would like to hope for is some more peaceable, calm management of differences. Now, what you see with the Philippines is that the Philippines is a U.S. treaty ally. Other U.S. treaty allies are working more closely with the Philippines. And so there's a certain pattern in who's signing military and security cooperation agreements with the Philippines. But then there are other actors, there are other claimants of the South China Sea, there are other actors that are also interested. So what you see then is, there's a clustering of U.S. allies on one side versus the PRC. The PRC has sort of expressed that they see this as containment, encirclement, and suppression. So we're likely to see a little bit more friction continue, maybe a lot more friction, but this will continue for some time yet.
All right, so perhaps a little bit more friction over time. Well, as always, thanks very much for your insights, Chong Jia in there from National University of Singapore. Now, in other news, Australia has signed an agreement with the US and UK to facilitate the exchange of nuclear secrets and material. Now, the new deal paves the way for Australia to equip its navy with nuclear-powered submarines. It's a move thought to be a strategic answer to countering China's growing military might in the region. Well, under the agreement, the three AUKUS partners would provide security arrangements for the transfer of sensitive US and UK nuclear material and know-how. Australia would indemnify its partners against any liability for nuclear risks from materials sent to the country. And it also states that Australia would foot the bill for any loss or injury from the disposal and storage of radioactive waste from nuclear submarines. Well, the pact was signed in Washington last week and tabled in the Australian Parliament today. Australia's Deputy Prime Minister and Defence Minister reiterated that the importance of the deal in Australia's acquisition of conventionally armed nuclear-powered submarines for its navy. Hong Kong's top court has rejected a final attempt by former media tycoon Jimmy Lai and 6 other pro-democracy campaigners to overturn their convictions for an unauthorized assembly in 2019. Well, the 7 activists had been found guilty of organizing the anti-police rally, which drew about 1.7 million people to Hong Kong's streets. The convictions were a huge blow to the city's flagging pro-democracy movement. Last year, a lower court had acquitted them of organizing the assembly, but had upheld the participation convictions. And so the activists continued their legal battle at the city's top court. Their final appeal had centered on the issue of operational proper exceptionality, a principle set out by two decisions of Britain's Supreme Court. But today, the judges at the Court of Final Appeal ruled against their appeal over the remaining convictions. Now, Mr. Lai is the most prominent figure to have been prosecuted under the controversial national security law. His case is widely seen as a test of judicial independence in Hong Kong after Beijing imposed the law more than 3 years ago. A time now for a short break, but coming up next on East Asia tonight, embattled Chinese developer Kaisa gets a breather to restructure offshore debt after a Hong Kong court grants an adjournment on a liquidation petition. And later, South Korean officials gear up to address growing safety concerns over electric cars.
Our idea is very simple. We selected 6 children and 6 seniors and matched them as new friends.
你喜欢吃什么
Ramen.
Okay, you sing that one. Let me hear.
Over the course of the 10 weeks, we want to see if these young children and seniors can really become good friends.
I love you.
Wow, so do I.
When they come together, they learn to respect each other for who they are.
It fosters a deeper understanding for the elderly and the children.
Anh Patrick 他们会来救。
Let them time again.
This is teaching the younger generation to love the elderly.
Uncle Thomas, I give you.
I think it doesn't really matter whether you're young or old, whether you are of different backgrounds. Invaluable friendships can manifest in the most unlikely places.
Saturday on Japan Hour.
栃木県那須塩原市町のそのレッテルを変えたいと動き出します。
何もしなかったりすると間違いなくこれは衰退していく。
父はやっぱりこの技術を今後ね将来に継承していくっていうのは役目でだと思ってて。わ
本当だ。すごい。競技の新たな活用法思い思いに工夫します。
Japan Hour Saturday on CNA. Japan Hour is brought to you by Sumitomo Corporation. MUFG, committed to empowering a brighter future. Zip Air, summer fares are now available. And iChai. This August, journey through stories of triumph and unity. Witness the resilience and passion of talented young individuals in Limitless as they overcome hardship to achieve greatness. More than just a cute face, pandas are effective diplomatic tools. Discover how China is using them for goodwill and how other countries are caring for them in Panda Power. What happens when 10 preschoolers interact with 10 seniors? See the results of this transformative social experiment on It Takes a Village. This August on CNA.
Thank you for 25 years of sports news, global headlines, and local stories. Here's to celebrating your achievements and understanding Asia. Happy 25th anniversary, CNA.
Hello again. You're watching East Asia Tonight, and we have Roland Lim now from CNA's Business Desk for more. So, Roland, tell us a bit more about Kaisa. So, they do have more time to negotiate with their creditors?
You heard right. 4 more weeks to be precise. The troubled property developer will now need to whip out a debt workout plan before the next hearing. And that's after a Hong Kong court allowed an adjournment on its liquidation petition. buying it some more time to work out with bondholders to come up with a viable restructuring plan. The Shenzhen-based developer has been working to restructure $12 billion worth of offshore debt for 2 years after defaulting in late 2021. A Kaiser senior advisor said the company is finalizing documents for an agreement that it hopes to be settled in less than a month. The immediate matter before the court today concerned 2023 notes with an outstanding principal of $750 million. Kaiser is the second biggest issuer of offshore bonds among Chinese developers behind China Evergrande. It first defaulted on its debt in 2021. With $32.7 billion in total liabilities, Kaiser's debt load is among the heaviest in the industry. In an attempt to address its financial woes, Kaiser has proposed to convert some of its debt into equities, issuing new dollar-denominated notes and offloading some assets. Foreign investors are pulling out a record amount of money from China as pessimism over the state of the world's second largest economy lingers on. According to the State Administration of Foreign Exchange, China's direct investment liabilities in its balance of payments plunged nearly $15 billion last quarter, compared to the $5 billion drop the first 6 months of the year. Foreign investment into China has slumped in recent years after hitting a record $344 billion back in 2021. Experts say the country's slowing economy, low interest rates, and a geopolitical tussle with the U.S. have sparked doubts about its economic potential. In addition, the rapid shift to electric vehicles in China has led companies to reduce their exposure to Chinese markets, prompting some to withdraw or to scale back their investments. The fall comes despite Beijing stepping up efforts to attract and to retain foreign investment. The government says it aims to keep its doors open to foreign businesses with advanced technologies in a bid to resist pressure from the U.S. and other Western nations urging companies to decouple from China. The highly volatile market conditions may have been erased, but analysts say a key threat remains. That's the so-called yen carry trade. Now, its continued unwinding could destabilize markets further. Let's take a look at how this popular trading strategy has made easy money so messy. The carry trade involves borrowing a currency from a place with low interest rates, in this case, the Japanese yen, and then using it to invest in assets that generate returns like U.S. tech stocks or government bonds, which have offered attractive returns in recent years. Now, as long as the yen stays low against the dollar, you're likely to be able to pay back what you borrowed and still make a profit. Now, the yen carry trade has been popular among investors because Japan was basically giving out free money as it kept its borrowing rates ultra low, while the US and Europe were frantically hiking rates post-pandemic. Troubles began a few weeks ago when the yen started strengthening against the greenback. Now, it climbed further when the Bank of Japan raised interest rates for the second time since March and signaled more hikes to come. The US Federal Reserve hinting rate cuts in the meantime drove the US dollar lower. And that's all traders rushed to sell their assets, such as stocks and even gold, in order to unwind their yen carry trades. And that explains last week's bloodbath across global markets. Concerns over a possible U.S. recession and the Fed maintaining interest rate at a more than 20-year high, adding to the negative sentiment. A top Japanese central banker then sent a dovish message, attempting to calm the yen, and markets have since regained ground. But uncertainty remains. This is, after all, the biggest carry trade in the world that it's ever seen. Now, no one really knows the size of the yen carry trade, and it's hard to find out, too, because the currency transactions aren't tracked centrally on exchanges. Now, one way is to look at its Japanese bank's foreign lending, which stands at about $1 trillion as of March, according to the Bank of International Settlements. But some analysts believe we're only halfway through the unwinding. Quick check on the Japanese yen. It is currently falling by about 0.5%, 147.32 to the dollar. This after the yen weakened last week, selling saw it surge to a 6-month high against the greenback. Checking in on market reaction out of East Asia, Korean and Taiwanese equities rose today, buoyed by gains in chip makers. Taiwan weighted index added about 1.5%, while Taiwan's semiconductor manufacturing, the biggest constituent in the index, settled with gains of 0.64% after rising by as much as 1.2%. South Korea's Kospi also rose more than 1%, with SK Hynix climbing, ending the day more than 3% higher. Mainland Chinese and Hong Kong stocks traded at a narrow range even as regional markets advanced. That's as concerns surrounding a potential slowdown in the world's second biggest economy prompted investors to remain on the sidelines. South Korean officials held a meeting today to discuss electric vehicle safety and whether to require car firms to disclose battery brands. Now, this follows a recent explosion of an electric sedan in an underground apartment parking lot earlier this month, which extensively damaged an apartment block. The country's Vice Environment Minister led the meeting, which also attended by the Transport and Industry Ministries as well as the National Fire Agency. Transport Ministry officials will hold talks with automakers including Hyundai, Mercedes-Benz and Volkswagen tomorrow. Media reports say proposals to disclose battery brands used in EVs will be discussed at the meeting. Public concerns about the safety of electric vehicles have risen after a parked Mercedes-Benz electric vehicle caught fire earlier this month, setting ablaze an entire parking garage under an apartment building in Incheon, Seoul. Now, around 140 vehicles were burnt, nearly 800 others sustained smoke damage. Hundreds of apartment residents were also relocated to temporary shelters due to the water and power disruptions. And government countermeasures are also expected to focus on two key areas, mainly the handling of EVs and the management of electric car chargers, as well as other related infrastructure. Seoul government is also planning to recommend revising apartment regulations on EV charging points. Now, for example, only electric cars charged 90% or less will be allowed to park in underground garages at apartment buildings. They also include a plan to prohibit the installation of chargers in underground garages that are not easily accessible to firefighters in case of a fire.
Right, and Roland joins us now for more on the latest moves by Korean authorities. It looks like they are taking the public safety aspects over EV batteries very seriously, as they should. I mean, we saw the pictures, the cars are all pretty burnt up pretty badly. So, Roland, what batteries are the biggest concerns when it comes to these electric cars?
Well, certainly in the top three of the biggest problems when it comes to EVs. Do you drive an EV car yourself?
Not at the moment.
Okay. Well, it's usually battery issues, climate control, and in-car electronics that give the biggest problems when it comes to EVs. So batteries may be dangerous. I mean, it's true that lithium-ion batteries are mostly used in EVs. I mean, they are the most common type of batteries around. They're even found in your phones, for example. They can catch fire, but manufacturers actually go to great lengths to ensure that the battery pack doesn't suffer any damage. The biggest cause of this fire, of course, is battery overheating, what's called thermal runaway. And that's usually from overcharging, that's usually from puncturing or the excessive heat that comes from the damage to the exterior of the battery themselves. I have to say at this point, though, that, it's widely accepted that petrol cars are also more likely to catch fire than EVs, but you're less likely to hear about a normal car getting caught on fire than you are EV. So there's, more reporting on EV cars getting fired, but they're actually less frequent. And let's not forget, EV cars have been fitted with battery management systems or BMS software in order to monitor and regulate the temperature of these batteries in order to avoid getting it from overheating. So in the rare instance that these EV batteries in electric vehicles actually catch on fire, firefighters are actually told to have the car themselves advised for a controlled burn. Unfortunately, in this instance that we just reported on, it happened in a basement car park. So it was difficult. So firefighters would have used water to try to disperse the flames. But at the same time, that would have actually caused clouds of toxic vapors in the air. So if you were nearby and you didn't have a face mask, that would have actually been very dangerous for you.
Yeah, I don't think I'm going to be buying an EV anytime soon, actually. These reports, we keep hearing. But what do we know about the manufacturers of batteries that are used in Korean EVs, because there are growing concerns about these fires?
Yes, South Korea's top automaker, Hyundai, has actually gotten ahead of this. They've actually come up with a list of all their 13 models of EVs and actually disclose where their batteries come from. We know that most of Hyundai's EVs, including their flagship Ioniq brand, are actually supplied by South Korea's two biggest battery suppliers. That's LG Energy Solutions as well as SK On. Even Hyundai's Kona Electric, that's the only car that's actually equipped by batteries made in China from CATL. That's China's, or actually the world's biggest battery manufacturer. So for full disclosure, Hyundai has actually come up with a list. And rival automaker Kia Motor is also doing the same shortly. I should also say that the affected Mercedes-Benz that started the fire in Incheon, that actually contained a nickel cobalt manganese battery by Farasis. And that's a Chinese manufacturer that actually had trouble with their batteries before and actually had to do a recall in China. So that's why the Transport Ministry in Korea is actually keen for automakers in South Korea to actually come up with a list of where their batteries come from for these EV cars.
Yeah, talked quite a lot about batteries today. Well, thanks for walking us through all of that. Thanks again, Roland Lim from CNA's Business Desk. We're going to go for another short break, but coming up next on East Asia Tonight, China last week kick-started a years-long effort to set up a network of internet satellites to rival SpaceX's Starlink. And I will be speaking to an expert on that in just a short while.
Even as the Philippines confronts China in the South China Sea.
Ako, bisita ko sa China talaga, pinahirapan kami dun sa Escalburo.
At home, there is a feud brewing. Marcos versus the Dutertes.
Ngayon ako nakakita ng isang ex-president na lahat ng threats na pwede mong hugutin sa sako ay binato mo sa isang incumbent president.
What is behind the rift and can it shape what happens in the South China Sea?
Parang lumalabas nito, it's a proxy war din, no?
Insight, Thursday on CNA.
The Philippines confronts China with a diplomatic protest over a South China Sea air incident that Manila describes as dangerous. Hong Kong's Jimmy Lai and his pro-democracy allies have lost their appeal. A court has upheld their convictions for unauthorized assembly during the 2019 protests. And a tropical storm makes a rare landfall in northern Japan, unleashing record rainfall and prompting the evacuation of thousands of people. China, in the past decade, has been advancing its space ambitions rapidly, from carrying out regular manned space missions to last week's launching of its first batch of internet satellites. Known as Qianfan, or Thousand Sails, the government-backed project was only launched last year. It's set to join a handful of large-scale space projects from internet providers in various countries. The satellite internet connection has become an important service for rural, under-resourced and disaster-hit areas. And it's also seen as key for growing technologies like autonomous cars and other internet-enabled devices. Beijing is looking to launch 108 satellites by this year, and it wants to achieve regional coverage with more than 600 satellites by next year. The mega constellation, when complete, is expected to consist of more than 15,000 low Earth orbit satellites, providing internet coverage from space for subscribers. China's joining a race that's dominated by international players this moment. And you may have already heard of Starlink. Well, that's the satellite internet service developed by Elon Musk's SpaceX, with around 6,000 satellites already in orbit. OneWeb is also one of the high-profile names that's owned by European firm Eutelsat. Now, China has lofty space aspirations. It's ramping up the commercial space sector as part of a broader push to cement its spot as a dominant power in the global space race, and has also launched military-linked satellites for navigation, communication, and surveillance, and aims to put astronauts on the moon by 2030. Well, for more analysis, let's bring in Qianfan Parker, a professor at Laboratory for Space Research, University of Hong Kong. Well, thanks for joining us, Professor Parker. Well, first up, tell us, how does Thousand Sails, China's new satellite constellation, stack up against Starlink? I mean, how worried is Elon Musk? Do you foresee it becoming a real rival down the road?
Down the road, it is correct, because as you pointed out, there's about 5,500 Starlink satellites already up there, and more being launched all the time. China's only just started this game and has just put 18 satellites up just a few days ago. And as you pointed out, there'll be hundreds, 108 maybe by the end of the year, and almost 700 by the year after that. And ultimately, a network of thousands and thousands of satellites, maybe 15,000. I mean, that's similar to the number that Elon Musk will originally put up, although we heard plans that ultimately there may be 50,000 satellites up there. So, that is a serious amount of hardware going up into space for a global internet connectivity, which is something that everybody's becoming to rely on more and more. And so I believe that China's looking to fill a market in the developing world, and also perhaps to be more competitive in terms of rates and charges to its customers that will make it worthwhile some customers choosing their Thousand Sails technologies and services than Starlink's.
Professor, 50,000 satellites. Now, that's an astonishing number. And of course, I have to link that to space debris being a growing concern. In Qianfan's initial launch, for instance, the rocket broke up into hundreds of pieces of debris, I believe. Some trackable, some were basically too small to track. So give us run through what sort of risks are we talking here when it comes to, like collisions, for instance?
Yes, I mean, the rocket that, unfortunately, the Long March 6 rocket body that exploded after it deployed all these satellites the other day, it could have been some residual fuel that exploded, or it could have been actually, ironically, perhaps a piece of space debris that collided with it and caused it to explode. And when you talk about hundreds of pieces of space debris, I mean, that's the tip of the iceberg. We're talking about the 700 or 800 pieces which are large enough to track, which means that they're 3 centimeters in size or larger. Now, when something like this happens, you get hundreds of thousands of pieces of debris, some of them, small flecks of paint, which only weigh a few micrograms. But when that hits at high relative velocities, another object, like another satellite, closing speeds of maybe 20 kilometers per second, I mean, that's the explosive power of a grenade, and that's enough to blow apart a small satellite. So, this space debris issue is getting more and more serious, and I'd call it existential to the survivability of, in fact, low Earth orbit as an ecosystem we can use into the future. I mean, there are predictions, modeling done on what is called a cascading and catastrophic collapse of the environment. It's called the Kessler syndrome. It sounds like a virus, and it kind of is. It's like the, low Earth orbit is infected with a virus of space debris, which we're trying to cure, but we don't really have the technology to cure it. But if that happens, and modeling says it could happen as early as 2035, then the entire low Earth orbit ecosystem for satellites is destroyed. Which means we kind of don't quite go back to the Stone Age, but we'll go back to the 1950s. We won't be able to have, our instantaneous money transfers. We won't be able to have the internet and the mobile phone use, and all of that will just disappear instantly.
Oh, the horrors of carrying cash around. So, Professor... Yeah, I just want to go back again to China. When they set their minds to doing something, I mean, they usually do it very well. We have seen with how they've developed their EVs. So what exactly is the big advantage for China here in having their own internet satellite network? And how big a game changer is it going to be for them?
Independence. I mean, there's a lot of geopolitics going around the world at the moment, a lot of talk of decoupling the world's two largest economies. I'm not a fan of that because I think everybody loses. I mean, we're far better off trusting each other to some degree and actually collaborating when we can and competing when we can't, but actually doing things and recognizing the rights of others to do things in their own way. So China's doing things in its own way, at its own pace, but that pace is pretty darn quick. So they've, as you said, emerged as a major spacefaring nation in the last 20 years, but particularly in the last 10, and is going gangbusters in the last 5. So, as you say, when they put their minds to it, they tend to actually do it pretty darn quickly and very successfully. If you just look at their Chang'e moon missions lately, they've just been, to the far side of the moon and brought back moon rock with their Chang'e 6 mission. Nobody's ever done that.
Sure. And Professor, I mean, what's the global reaction been to China's recent space missions as well as their advancements? I mean, you talked about them being independent. I mean, fair play for them, wouldn't you say?
Yeah. Having their own capacity, not being self-reliant, and realizing that, I mean, they were forbidden from joining the International Space Station by the Wolf Amendment of the US Congress, which is unfortunate. But what it actually did, it just spurred China on to develop its own independent capabilities much quicker and faster than perhaps they otherwise would have done. And now they've got this amazing space station up there, the Chinese space station, which is brand new. It's about a third the size, maybe a bit smaller than the International Space Station. But it's very modern, very new, very cutting edge, and it's actually in many ways more advanced than the ISS, which is now 20 years old or so and should have been deorbited already on safety grounds. But they're keeping it up there because no one wants to just let China have the only really good space station going around. So, that's interesting developments that sometimes, you do one thing and that has unintended consequences.
And Professor, as China pushes forward with its space ambitions, what are some of the potential consequences for global governance and regulation of space exploration? I mean, what are they talking about in this regard?
I mean, if you look at the Chinese white paper from 2021 about its interest and uses of space, I mean, it talks about international cooperation in that document over 40 times. It talks about collaboration, I think, about 36 times, and internationalization. So China, on paper, says it wants to collaborate in an open-handed way. So it's opened up its Chinese space station to experiments from all over the world. The Chinese moon missions, they've got, they got some experiments from Italy, from Sweden, from Switzerland, from France, from Pakistan and all over. And so they seem to be, on the face of it, quite genuine in their intent for international collaboration. So you're taking it at face value. You look at what they've done and what they said they'd do, and they kind of seem to do it. And they also seem to have a lot of respect for United Nations and what the United Nations says for the peaceful utilization of outer space. So, I mean, as an objective observer, I'm an Australian. I'm based in Hong Kong at the university there, University of Hong Kong. And I just look at what they say and what they do and make that direct link at the moment to what's actually happening.
Oh, it's been a great discussion, and I'm certainly going to be looking up what Kessler syndrome is all about. Well, thanks so much for enlightening us, Quentin Parker, Professor at Laboratory for Space Research, University of Hong Kong. Turning our attention to other news now, Fiji is looking to China's agriculture and fisheries programs to reduce poverty. But Prime Minister Sitiveni Rabuka stressed that his island nation will not, in his words, upset the apple cart when it comes to regional security. Well, on his first visit to China today, the Fiji leader told Australian broadcaster ABC that there shouldn't be any fear that his trip will affect stability in the Pacific, be it in the economic, military or security spheres. Well, the Pacific Islands are seen as strategic hotspots for China, the US and its traditional ally, Australia. Fiji, one of the few island nations that has a military, struck a policing cooperation deal with China a decade ago. Mr. Rabuka kept that deal after he was elected in 2022, but ended the practice of embedding Chinese police with Fiji forces. In June, he announced a police force reset that will see greater cooperation with Australia. A tropical storm Maria has tore through northern Japan, disrupting flights and rail services while forcing residents in some areas to evacuate their homes. Reports say the storm dumped a month's worth of rain in a day in some areas. Well, Prime Minister Fumio Kishida has reassured the public that the government would do its utmost to keep the damage under control.
台風5号の影響により、東北地方に記録的な大雨が予想されることから、休日であっても、緊張感を持って、災害対応に遺漏なきをするため、改めて松村防災担当大臣等を呼び、現時点における被害状況、さらには危機管理体制について確認をいたしました。
Maria is the first typhoon to hit mainland Japan this year. The storm packed maximum wind speeds of 72 kilometers per hour, barreling northeast over land into the Sea of Japan. Well, it's rare for storms to make landfall in Japan's northern Pacific coast. Weather forecasters say more than 36 centimeters of rain fell in just 24 hours up to this morning. Well, that's the highest amount since records started in 1978. Well, some residents in the region of Iwate have been asked to evacuate. There has been no immediate reports of any casualties. The storm also forced the cancellation of 86 flights to the northern region, many of which connect the northeastern Tohoku region with Tokyo and Osaka. Coming up next on East Asia Tonight, rising costs are threatening the survival of Japan's museums. Find out how operators are trying to boost visitor numbers with a string of new strategies.
Our idea is very simple. We selected 6 children and 6 seniors and matched them as new friends.
你喜欢吃什么
Ramen.
Okay, you sing that one. Let me hear.
Over the course of the 10 weeks, we want to see if these young children and seniors can really become good friends.
I love you.
Wow, so do I.
When they come together, they learn to respect each other for who they are.
It fosters a deeper understanding for the elderly and the children.
Anh Patrick 他们会来救。
This is teaching the younger generation to love the elderly.
Uncle Thomas, I give you.
I think it doesn't really matter whether you're young or old, whether you are of different backgrounds. Invaluable friendships can manifest in the most unlikely places.
Saturday on Japan Hour.
栃木県那須塩原市、町のそのレッテルを変えたいと動き出します。
何もしなかったりすると間違いなくこれは衰退していく。
父はやっぱりこの技術を今後ね将来に継承していくっていうのはやつ目でだと思ってて。わ、
本当だ。競技の新たな活用法、思い思いに工夫します。
Japan Hour, Saturday on CNA. Japan Hour is brought to you by Sumitomo Corporation. MUFG, committed to empowering a brighter future. Zip Air, summer fares are now available. And iChai.
not know this, but Japan is home to thousands of museums. But shrinking revenue and rising costs are threatening their sustainability. And that's despite a record tourism boom. Well, CNA's Michio Ishida looks at how Japan's museums are adopting different concepts and strategies to survive.
High-tech art stimulates the senses to create a fantasy world here at Team Lab Digital Art Museum in Tokyo. It plays with lights, sounds, and even scents for a novel experience. And it's been drawing crowds since it opened in February. Tickets are sold out days in advance, snapped up by tourists who are visiting Japan in record numbers, partly due to the falling yen. It's a heartening rebirth for the museum, which shut in 2022 due to redevelopment. In Japan, there are 4,500 museums according to the Japan Museum Association. 69% are national or public run. 1/10 of all museums are art museums. And generally speaking, they are not doing well. The number of inbound tourists roughly quadrupled in the decades leading up to 2019, boosting museum attendance. COVID-19 changed this. Mori Art Museum closed for more than 7 months between 2020 and 2021. It says income fell to 25% of what it used to be. But it managed to survive as it is backed by Mori Building, a major developer that also runs the Digital Art Museum.
Mori Art Museum is simply part of the larger corporation. By having contemporary museum and then also this exhibition space where the exhibitions are changing every couple of months, so constantly new people are coming in. So it's good for the entire town making. And because the Mori Building is a town making real estate business.
Mori's strategy of having largely temporary exhibitions has helped visitorship recover to about 80% of pre-pandemic levels. But this can require substantial investment. Meanwhile, the fallout of low ticket sales during COVID-19, rising expenses like utility bills, and the shadow of subsidy cuts amid an economic slump are posing challenges. This is prompting museums to seek out other sources of support, with even revered institutions like the National Museum of Nature and Science turning to crowdfunding.
The business model of running a museum never make profit. So for the privately funded museums, either they form as a non-profit organization like Koeki Hoji, it's like a public foundation.
Artisan Museum in Tokyo is one such museum. It displays masterpieces by renowned artists, from Monet to Cézanne. There are also pieces by Japanese artists dating back to the Edo period. Some are part of the collection of Shojiro Ishibashi, founder of tire maker Bridgestone. He opened Bridgestone Museum to share his treasures with the public. It was later closed and rebranded as Artisan Museum in 2020. The museum is owned and managed by the Ishibashi Foundation.
日本の政府が認証している公益財団法人という組織形態でございまして、パブリックインタレストに応えるというのが使命でございます。企業と同じように役員によって構成された会で経営はきちっと見ていただくと。一般的な企業組織とはちょっと違って。なんて言いましょうか、文化事業でございますんでね。
Its status means the museum and its donors are eligible for tax breaks, a welcome relief as it has about 3,500 art pieces under its care. Donations make up less than 7% of museums' income in Japan, according to the Cultural Affairs Agency, compared to as much as 38% in the U.S. Mr. Ishibashi, who is founder Shojiro's grandson, says artisan can make ends meet, but he admits the current economic climate is a concern.
世の中がどういう動きになるかっていうのは非常にいつも心配してて、毎日情報を集めたりしておりますね。ですから経済状況がどう変わるか、当然これはあります。
When we were there on a weekday, the museum was bustling with visitors eager to view its permanent and temporary collections. Artisan gives back to society by offering students free admission, though adults have to pay about $8 and up.
美術館自体はあんまり何回も行けるほどそんなに裕福ではないんですけど、でもこの展示行きたいっていうやつのためには月1ぐらいでは行きますね。仕事探してるんですけど、探しつつ絵もずっと続けようと思ってるんで、インプットしに美術館に来てるって感じですね。どっちかというと
収蔵品の展示があってですね、でそれは時代ですとか、あとは国もかなりバリエーションに富んでて、そういったものが1回に見られるというのはすごく楽しいなと思って見てました。
At the end of the day, rather than profit, museums say what they hope to achieve is to make themselves a part of the community lives and spark an interest in the arts, especially among the next generation of museum goers. Michio Ishida, CNA, Tokyo.
Well, the Olympics in Paris ended with a spectacular closing ceremony with Tom Cruise adding some Hollywood glamour. And that's because the torch is passed to Los Angeles, which will be the host of the 2028 Summer Games. Well, let's spotlight East Asian nations. They put up a strong showing, with China tying the U.S. for the highest number of gold medals, 40. It had a total of 91 medals. Japan followed with 20 golds and a total of 45 medals. South Korea further down the list with 13 golds and 32 medals overall. And of course, we can't forget Hong Kong, the territory, winning 2 gold and 2 bronze medals. Now, in China, consumers seem to have been keeping a close eye on where their athletes have excelled the most during the Olympic Games. Well, China's historic wins in tennis, for example, have propelled interest in the sport. Over the past 2 days, Alibaba's premium shopping platform, Tmall, saw the number of searches for tennis-related products soar by 300% compared to last year. Another e-commerce platform, VIP.com, showed sales of tennis skirts surging 91% on year. A Chinese state-run Global Times reported that the sport has been growing in popularity, along with more demand for niche sports. Bookings of training courses have more than doubled in July, and these figures could well surge further going forward, with Chinese athletes expected to make waves in international tennis. And on that note, it's time to wrap up East Asia tonight for this Monday. Singapore viewers, do stay tuned for highlights from the Paris 2024 Olympics. And of course, don't forget your headlines anytime at cna.asia. We're also on Facebook, YouTube, and on X. Thanks for watching.